your microphones. Don't.
Oh yeah, sorry, don't bang.
Okay. Some instructions. Don't bang tables and don't say yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you, love. I do.
Yeah, and a table banger. Okay, it's all recording.
Okay, Flo McSweeney, legendary Irish singer, actress, entertainer, but singer, amazing vocalist. The first question I want to ask you is, tell me where the singing came from. When did you know that was going to be your thing? How did you?
I'd say my mother would have said I was singing before I could talk. And probably sort of 12 or 13, I had a very lonely summer where I was kicked out of the friend group. You know the way girls can be bitches.
Yeah.
And I was kicked out of the friend group very deliberately at the beginning of a long summer, 3-month summer holiday. And we were all neighbours. We all lived beside each other. And so I discovered my 2 elder sisters' record collection, which I think consisted of about 5 albums.
Yeah.
One was South Pacific.
Yeah.
That one. Steely Dan's Asia,
Yeah.
James Taylor, and Carole King's Tapestry. And I started listening to Tapestry, and I remember I learned the whole album, and then I went back and I learned the first harmonies, and then I learned the second harmonies, and then I remember thinking, oh, I can sing. And then I got involved in school in, drama and...
Had you studied music before
Not
then?
at all.
But you understood about the harmonies they were
did.
singing, and you were able to pick them out.
I think with some people, and I've always had it. And one of the guys who worked in the Natural Women show, Tony Malloy, the bass player, it's like an ear. And Peter Eads, our musical director, they just have an ear. And I think I have that ear I'll hear a harmony, then I'll hear the next one.
I'm always impressed by people who can do that, because in the Nualas I had to really learn the harmonies hard. So I'm really impressed that as a little kid you're listening, not only learning the melody and understanding it, but picking out all the harmonies, learning it all.
But I also, when I was older, in my 20s, I worked a lot with Bill Whelan. And Bill Whelan, of Riverdance fame, Bill was a big Steely Dan fan, and he had a band at one point, and they played a lot of Steely Dan stuff. So when I worked with Bill, you'd be in the studio and you'd be doing like 5, 6 harmonies, like mental stuff. And you'd kind of adjust the headphones, because I like to hear all the previous vocals that I've done as I'm laying down a new one. So the headphone would be like this for the first harmony, then it would kind of go back. Then I nearly have it like on my nose. And you'd be thinking, mad harmony. So
would you be writing the harmonies, or would he have?
Oh no, Bill would have picked every single one out on the piano. And when I think I'm good at harmonies, like maybe the first 3, but Bill would be on the 4th and the 5th.
So you'd be in the studio, and would he just play? And
he'd say, so you'd record one harmony, and then you think, okay, we're done. And then he'd go, I have another one, and then he'd pick it out on the piano, and I'd be there, and that would be when it would.
And you'd only have to hear it once.
Oh no! Sometimes I'd do it, and I'd hit one note, be wrong, and I go, give it to me again, don't talk, give it to me again, and just try and get it out. So it would be like, oh, what? And then you'd listen back and you think, how can this possibly work? And then you'd listen back to the wall of voices of all these odd harmonies. Yeah.
You're 12 or 13, you've learned all these songs, you know you can sing, you know you can pick out the harmonies, you go back to school. Are you on the I'm going to be a singer path then?
I like to think I was, and I don't fully remember it, but I don't ever remember wanting to do anything else. And when I look back on school reports, and I have some of the early school reports, I spent my life gazing out the window, singing in my head. I was never present in class, never. And it would be, if Florence applied herself, she could do so well. I applied myself to one thing. When there was a show or something, I was in the school choir, I was in the church choir, not very religious.
Flo, there's a million people out there who had the dreams like that, when I can sing, but you very quickly turned it into a phenomenal career. What was the trajectory?
Well, I think I was 17, still at school, and I answered an ad in Hot Press for a band out in Bray that were looking for a singer. And I knew that my mother would be absolutely not. My mother was a housewife.
Yeah.
My father worked in clothing manufacturing. He was a director of a company that made raincoats. And my elder sister Anne, who ended up being a stewardess with Aer Lingus, she was a good singer. Yeah. My sister Brenda became an actress, so that it was there. But I knew Mum would look at us and think, where do these people come from? So I answered this ad got the ad, and the band got the audition, and the band was called Blind Dancer. And I thought it was the coolest name until a band on the scene came on the scene called Deaf Actor. So there was Blind Dancer and Deaf Actor. And I remember, and it was kind of this sort of slightly gothic music. You know, it was stretched across the universe, my arms amongst the stars. It was like all this. And I used to think I was Kate Bush. I used to wear like a bodysuit, and I crimped my hair. Do you remember those crimpers? Yeah, it's like putting your head in a toaster. So the hair was like this, an old black eyeliner. And I was with Blind Dancer for I don't know how long. And then I remember I did disastrously at school. So disastrously that the day the Leaving Cert results came out, my mother sent me to stay with my aunt in Cork. And she went up to get my Leaving Cert results. I don't think I even asked if I passed. My maths exam, I wrote a short story. I was good at English. I loved English and history, and I did love to write. So I felt that there was a creativity within me. And then my mum...
To write an essay for
maths. And I think it was basically why I was going to fail the maths exam. And I think I signed it because I wrote this essay, yours faithfully. And you know that kind of thing when you have to stay in the exam for the first 40 minutes before you can leave, and you scrape back your chair and everyone else is... You're scraping back your chair and you're kind of going, sorry, but and they're all looking at me going, oh, fail. And then so mum made me promise to do, she said, please do a secretarial course and then you can do what you like. So I did a secretarial course on Charlemont Bridge, and I made up my own shorthand, which looked absolutely fantastic, but I couldn't read it back. It looked great on the page, but I couldn't read back my own shorthand. And a big old, you know, the big freaking flumpy typewriters.
Oh yeah.
The big kind of...
Yeah, I remember a nun saying, a lovely nun taught me to type, but she went, you need to learn on a manual so you'll have the wrist action. Yeah. As if you need wrist action now. You're...
I know.
Did you get that? You know, you need to snap.
But I was literally, and I remember thinking, this is just horrific. Everything about this is horrific. And then there was an ad agency, McConnell's ad agency across the bridge. And they came to the secretarial school looking for someone to fill in for lunch hour. I offered my services, and so I started working there at lunch on the desk, on the reception desk, and then the girl left. So I never even finished the secretarial course. I worked for McConnell's for probably about a year. I loved all the creative people. They were all bonkers. I mean, when I watch Mad Men, and I watched Mad Men with my daughter Mia, and even though it starts in the 50s, I said, this was the 80s. I said, this was kind of it.
It was a high point of advertising, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Big budgets and a glamorous job.
Yeah, but I was on reception, but I hung out with all the creative people.
And also you were very, very good looking. I was looking back at pictures of you.
I was terribly shy.
Yeah, but I mean,
I was terribly shy. And but while I was there, another ad in a newspaper, I did ballet from the time I was 4, and I loved dance. And I went to this lady called June Glazier. She did a dance school in Monkstown. She was very eccentric, half Spanish, very flamboyant and wonderful. And I mean, she used to do the choreography for the likes of Mike, which was Mike Murphy's TV show back in the late 70s, 80s. Yeah. And she had an ad, I think again in Hot Press, saying she was putting together this dance company. And at the time you had kind of Hot Gossip and Pan's People and those kind of, you know, women hanging out of scaffolding with the Kate Bush hair. Yeah. And so I rang her and said, no, I don't want to audition, but I'd love to do a class. And she said, oh, come and do a class, it'd be lovely to see you. So I do a class. And then she offers me a job going to Germany with mixture ballet. And so my parents were on holiday visiting relatives in Cork. And by the time they came back, I was 19. By the time they came back, I had handed in my notice. And I might as well have said, I am joining the circus. Yeah. And my mother being, you know, a woman who was born in 1925 and not worldly, wasn't happy about it, but didn't have the worldly experience to know what I was going into. So I ended up going to Germany there was 8 of us in the group, and we did everything from, we were in a place called Karlsruhe, a place called the Rheingold, which apparently is still there, and it was like a supper club. So you'd have Ralph Bunchkin, the house singer, with the kind of perma tan and the glossy long hair, who'd, you know, be kind of schmooze, and the tight little pants with the flares. And then you'd have...
Was he German?
Ralph
obviously,
Budkin. And
yeah.
then...
Obviously.
And then,
It's not a Cork name.
Ralph.
Ralph.
From London. From London, innit? And then you had, we were the house dancers. So we would like open our show with like, we were in like the big huge feather things at the tiny little brass and the feather, you know, coming down the steps to New York. And in the second half of the show, we'd be hanging out of I was going to say chandeliers, but no, scaffolding. So we did, and I was there for nearly a year. And then in between all that, then you had the strippers. And it became so sort of normalized to me that we'd be between shows, we'd be behind the bar looking at the strippers and going, she's a good stripper. She's not so good. And she's a really good stripper. And I befriended this woman she was from New York, called Keita Lita, and she was this Amazonian black lady with, you know, the tiny kind of Bo Derek plaits, and she was a stripper, and she had boa constrictors, and her boa constrictors were kept in our dressing room, and we had a dressing room which was the size of my kitchen table, and there was a tank with the boa constrictors, and we'd be there like, you know, ducking out the door, going out the door sideways with your freaking big feather headdresses, and she'd be coming down to get the constrictors out, and she'd be whooshing them out of it because she'd be on before or after us, and she'd be putting them over her shoulders, around her neck, and we'd all be kind of clumping up the stairs to go on stage. I mean, madness. And they were fed every Monday. They were fed live.
Yeah, they could kill her. A boa constrictor could...
Yeah, but she was amazing. And I said she never showed so much as a nipple. She had this amazing knack. She'd about however many of them she had. So when the top would come off and the bottoms would come off, the bow strickers would all be... But they'd be fed every Monday. Yeah. And I do remember that, thinking, oh,
what did they feed them?
Hamsters, live, freaking live. And you'd see them going down whole. I mean, yeah, so that was, some of the girls were fascinated by it and used to go down to watch, whereas I'd go, I can't do this. So my mother, then my sister, because she was working for Aer Lingus, came to visit me and armed with my mother's fruitcake and things from home to see, just check on Florence and make sure she's all right. And Anna's sitting at the bar, and then this glass of champagne arrives over. It's called a piccolo. They had these kind of fern plants everywhere. So some of the girls, not us, some of the strippers would drink with the clients, and they would charge them 25 marks for a piccolo of a snipe of champagne. Oh, yeah. And then the plants...
It's like a hostess bar.
Yeah.
And then they throw
it in
they
affect them in the plants. Yeah. And so my sister...
And they get another one, and then they get commission.
On them.
Yeah,
so my sister, she's sitting at the bar minding her own business, checking on her youngest sister, her 19-year-old sister, and a piccolo arrives over from my sister Anne, and she's going, no, I didn't order this. And they go, that's from the gentleman over there. And then one of the guys in our dance company, his sister had come with us, and she worked behind the bar. Yeah. Bernie, I think her name was, and I remember her sliding Anne like 10 marks. And she goes, there's your commission. And I was going, oh Jesus Mary. It was insane.
Did she tell your mother?
No, she did not. And I don't know if I ever told her.
That was an amazing experience.
That was 1980, 1981.
I loved back then this thing of just kind of following your nose.
Yeah.
That's how I got into performing too, looking at things in the back of, I was in London. It's amazing experience.
It is. And then, and also there was a house singer who was hilarious. She was from the Philippines, and her name was Between, and I used to call her Betwixt. Yeah. Betwixt and Between. And her English was appalling. And she used to sing all the songs phonetically. So, I mean, she was, and she used to have to sing Barbra Streisand's I Am a Woman in Love in German. Ich bin die Frau in der Liebe. Not quite as romantic. And she got laryngitis and she couldn't perform. And Ziggy Borscht, who owned the club, I mean, it's a movie. When I look back at it, I said the name,
I love the
characters.
Yeah.
And Ziggy Borscht knew that I could sing. Juna told him
Ziggy Borscht. You couldn't make up Ziggy Borscht.
Ziggy Borscht. And it's funny.
It's not Ziggy sausage. Borscht.
Borscht is like Borscht farten. Borscht farten.
Ziggy sausage fart. Yeah.
Sausage fart. Yeah. And he... And it's funny, I can picture him. So it's amazing. I can't remember people from my past in interim years, and yet all these names are still with me. And betwixt or between. Anyway, she had laryngitis, so Ziggy asked me would I step in for her. So I used her backing tracks, So all the English songs, obviously, I knew. And then there was an Italian one that she sang phonetically. So I ended up singing it with my phonetics. So I'd say it probably sounded Greek by the time.
What was that? Do you remember the word?
No, so this is how bad my Italian, because this is not Italian, but it sounded convincing. Dammi quamoro, niente ti vente, dimmi se hai bisogno di me, tu sei sempre mia, anche quando vado via, sei unica donna per me. I mean, that was it. I mean, nonsense, made up language, because hers was, by the time it got translated to me, and you know, was even more nonsense.
You did that, and after the first time you did it, did they all go, oh?
Well, I don't know if they did, but I did. I kind of went, oh, I think I need to get rid of the feather headdress and just sing.
You loved it, and you knew you could do. And could you tell by the effect your singing had on the punters?
I know, because I could possibly have still been dressed in the feather headdress and bikini, so it might have been more about that when I was 19. But
how did you do that for a while?
I did it for a while, and I went to Frankfurt to a studio where you could get backing tracks, and then it became incorporated into our show, and then I started doing it in the show. And then eventually, after whatever, it was a year, I came back to Dublin, did decide that I wanted a proper job, because that had been so mental. So I worked in Pizzazz Hair Design, which was in the Paris Cortana Centre, as a receptionist. But I'd say I was there 2 or 3 months, and I joined Toy with Rhythm. I started Toy with Rhythm, which was my first proper band with Ed Dara.
Yeah.
And Adrian, we called her Ed, wrote the songs, played keyboards, and then we entered a competition called with the Maxell Tapes Awards. That's how far back it was. And like, you know, a couple of thousand bands entered this competition, and we won. Wow. And our prize was we got to go to Winmalaine Studios, and Bill Whelan produced and recorded our first single, and the song was called Junior Discovers Electricity.
I know,
do you remember that?
Oh, jeez.
Do you remember about a kid that sticks his fingers in a light socket and his eyes ignite velocity? I mean, it was the maddest song.
Flo, I didn't know that was you.
Junior Discovers Electricity.
Because I remember as a kid at home in Sligo listening to that song, thinking exactly what you're saying there. What a crazy topic for song.
I know. I mean,
How did it go?
And I remember it was like Ed used to describe her keyboard playing as you know, that 2 fingers, that 1980s.
Yeah. Were you playing keys?
No, I didn't play anything. I couldn't even fucking play a tambourine. Yeah. Ed played keys. Then Niall McSweeney, no relation, was on guitar, and then we had Trevor Hutchinson on bass, who ended up in the Water Boys, and Brian Desper. And Willie DeMont. We did a load of different people.
Do a bit of it
in the band. What was it? He finds a plug beside the light, plugs in the nail. His eyes ignite velocity. I can't remember it now, but I also had this exaggerated vibrato like Susie and the Banshees. I really liked Susie and the Banshees, so I tried to sound like Susie.
But off the time, you know, it was
brilliant. Well, it was.
Yeah.
And that was a real changing point in my life, because I suppose we went from being a band in the suburbs to suddenly Bill Whelan became a good friend. I became Bill's session singer. So in the 80s,
So that was the moment.
That was the moment.
That was the moment. So you had done your groundwork, you had done your stage time, you had trained as a dancer, you worked on your ear, and that was your break.
Yeah.
Because that is a classic of Irish pop.
Yeah.
Then.
I know.
As soon as she said, and I didn't know that was you, Flo.
And it was a real.
So what age were you then?
You would have been 21.
21, and that was it. You're in the biz.
I had my 21st birthday in Pizzazz Hair Design, and I still tried to keep my job, and they were so kind to me, Robert and Derry, who owned the salon, because I was a disaster. I mean, I remember like doing a gig, ending up in, and all excited, you know, hyper after the gig, ending up in Susie Street drinking friggin' port for fucking what was
good
now
for the
feels
voice.
Like 100.
Did you ever hear that?
No.
Port is good for the voice.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, we used to spend mad money, like it'd be like, I don't know, 20 quid for a bottle of port, it'd be porter, cheap champagne, and coming out of Susie Street at 5 o'clock in the morning, going to somebody's house, drinking a load of coffee, smoking loads more fags, and then going into work. And then I'm at the desk, I was a receptionist, and on a quiet day, on a day like that, I'd like sort of just put my head down at the desk and then someone come in the door, hello, Pizzazz, Sign, can I help you? And I go, no, that's supposed to be on the phone.
But they must have loved that you had won this competition, because you were on telly with that too.
Yeah. And then it sort of kind of took off, and then it was time to, to leave my job.
Because not only did you have all that ability and everything, but I'll say it again, you looked amazing.
Well, I have Pizzazz and Robert to thank for my look back then, and this was a funny day, because when I started working in Pizzazz, I had long brown hair that was like curtains, and I had thick hair, and my hair would kind of go like that. So I used to let it get greasy in order for it to flatten it down, which is mental. And then one day, between Robert and Derry, Robert was the part owner and with Derry, and Robert was colourist and Derry was stylist, and it was a Monday, a quiet Monday, and the two of them were looking at me on the desk with my long brown curtains, and they went, Mum, let's give you a look. And I came out of the salon that day with kind of this length short hair. Now it was bleached. Bleach back then was quite different, but it was probably harsher. So it was a kind of pigmentation of this a pig skin colour. It was kind of slightly pink. It took a couple of days to get bleach. My father nearly had a conniption when he saw me.
But I bet you...
I remember.
I
think I felt I went from being invisible to visible.
Yeah.
From a haircut, which made me, if it makes any sense, it made me feel worse about myself, because in the sense that is it just all about how you look? You know what I mean? That I was kind of like plodding along, doing my own thing. Suddenly I get this fab new do-over, and then and I couldn't actually handle attention, and I always found that hard. Which is weird when you're in the job of...
I totally relate to that, and I know exactly the thing. But then, and it's funny because you really had it too. And I saw you on stage the other night doing the show you just did in Vicar St.
Natural Women.
And you glow. You do go, oh, wow.
Well, I've always loved... It's a funny thing. I mean, as a 63-year-old, I'm not shy anymore, but I was up until probably my mid-30s, I was painfully shy, to the point that I had a reputation of being quite standoffish and a bit cold, and I wasn't at all. It was shyness. And I remember Bono coming up to me in the Dockers, which was the pub around the corner from Mill Lane, and this would have been in the early 90s, and I was with the gang, and I'm sitting there and I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around and it's Bono. I felt the blood rush from my face, my legs, everything, and I looked at him and I went, hiya, and then I turned back. And he's left there like that. And I remember afterwards thinking, oh my God, like, I'm just like mortified. And I've never met him since. And I'm sure he's long forgotten. He hasn't thought, but I think about it. And I think he must have thought I was the rudest. But I always felt, even when I was presenting TV shows, that, I could put up a front. I mean, and I'm sure you get it too. If you're a shy person, sometimes being on stage is the safest place.
Is a relief from that constant,
And I was always had problems with one-on-one. Not at all now. It's like my shyness, my fear. I had an awful lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
And kids are lucky in that they can get help and they can label it and call it by its name. Whereas back then, I went around for most of my 20s with a ball of what I realised was anxiety in my stomach.
But things were really taken off you because you started,
Can I ask a question though? What was the moment when you lost that anxiety? What was the thing that happened for you?
I think for me, it was becoming a mother.
Yeah.
I think for me it was. And I know for everyone else it's different. And it's also when you grow up and everyone kind of thinks, because I look at my kids in their 20s and they think that they should be at a certain place in their life by 23 or 29 and I just said, no, I really think at 40 was when I just kind of landed. It was like when I landed and I thought, nobody's ever happy with themselves. I am happy. I am a happy person, but that I didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. And weirdly enough, I mean, I had Mia when I was 40, and between 40 and 50 was my quietest time after Match had taken off for Baz.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a constant for the kids. I wanted to pick them up from school. So those 10 years between 40 and 50, I thought I'd never sing again. I thought I'd probably never perform again. And I'd still do voiceovers and still do a little bit of session work, but I did no live work. But on my 50th birthday, it was a eureka moment fueled by drink. on the day of my 50th birthday, I just said, I'm going to start singing again. And so it was like starting again at 50, you know.
Well, just that the gig you did with Leslie Dowdall in Vicar St, there was certain points where one or other of you would joke about being older. You had the really funny line about that you couldn't see the stage. What did you say? It was bend and squint.
Bend and squint. It was bend and squint.
You were really making me laugh because you kept coming up with these little.
Well, it was like vanity wouldn't allow me to. I mean, I do small gigs, and I do this lovely gig in Wicklow in a place called the Coach House, and I do it once a month, and I wear my glasses. I don't actually need my iPad. I know the songs, but that thing of not trusting yourself. And I do, but on a stage like Vicar St, I thought, I'm not wearing my reading glasses. Yeah. So it was only when I had put it on, they were all sellotaped to the monitor, and I looked down at it and I went, oh, for fuck's sake, I can't see
that was hilarious. But then any other moments of mentioning age, I was thinking, wow, I just really saw it from the outside, just looking at the pair of you, that you're so in your power. It's so brilliant what you're doing that you don't need to even mention it. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
It's actually not part of the piece anymore.
No.
And it made me vow not to really move away from saying that. But because actually you just want to see what you it's just so riveting and so brilliant to see someone so experienced and exceptional in what they do on stage.
It's funny, I think Leslie would agree with me. A thing that I have always felt when I got back into singing at 50, and why I love singing live, and that whole thing of losing yourself in the music, but I feel of no age when I'm on stage.
That's what came across, and that's what I really observed. Just sitting there on the balcony looking at it, I went, oh, they don't need to mention this at all because we're not seeing it. What we're doing is enjoying an experience. Yeah. I want to ask you about that moment. You've got Junior discovers electricity, you work with Bill Whelan, and then you become his go-to. Yeah. And tell us how, did you worked with Stock, Aitken and Waterman in...
A little bit. There was another girl, Suzanne Rattigan, and when I lived in London.
So when did the move to London come?
I had been, after I was in Moving Hearts for about 2 years.
Okay, so what was the trajectory? You were working with Bill and then...
And I was doing a session with Bill, and I think we were doing a session for the band Those Nervous Animals.
Oh, do you know them?
Yeah,
I love them. They're from Sligo.
I know, and I did a couple of tracks on that album, the one with my friend John. And so Bill produced some of that. Yeah. And they had gotten Owen O'Neill, who was the bass player in Moving Hearts, in on that session. Christy Moore had long since departed Moving Hearts, then Mick Hanley had left. And I think they decided that they wanted to kind of sex up their image a little bit and maybe look at something completely different. And so I met Owen at that session, and then I don't know who I got a phone call from about joining Moving Hearts. Billy McGrath, I was doing their PR at the time, so he could have been, I know he was definitely involved in that. Yeah. So suddenly I found myself in Moving Hearts, and Moving Hearts at that point were huge. But in my naivety, I had no idea really that I'm replacing like Christy Moore, Mick Hanley, and suddenly there's this little flipperty-jipperty, blondie 23-year-old, about to join Moving Hearts. I mean, had I known, plus musically, I don't think it was a great fit. I am, I'm not that kind of singer, that kind of fist flailing.
What kind of stuff were you?
I mean, I was doing all the stuff that they won.
Like, what would be their big number?
Well, I mean, it was Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Russian roulette, but I just thought, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that one. And I didn't. But there was the only song that suited me. There was a beautiful song that Declan Sinnott had written called Take a Chance. And it was a beautiful, soulful song. I loved doing that. And then Dark End of the Street, which is is it a Wilson Pickett song? They were the ones I enjoyed doing, but all the fist flailing stuff. But my first gig with Moving Hearts was the Montreux Jazz Festival. And we supported Van Morrison and Freddie Hubbard, who was a very famous trumpet player. So we're on stage in that Rose Bowl, that famous venue in Montreux. That's my first gig with them. And
were you phased, or did you?
Oh, totally phased. I mean, it was totally phased.
Because you were fronting the band.
Phased, but also at the same time innocent and arrogant enough to think,
and was it fab?
I can't remember much about it. I do remember that at the end, at the end of the gig, I was a huge Van Morrison fan growing up. And one of the things I would practice too, where I always thought in Van Morrison's early work, his singers were a huge part of his sound, his backing singers, and I would sing along to the backing singers. And then we did a tour. So we went across America, we went across Europe. So that's certainly, and I thought being the only girl amongst 14 guys, because they were a co-op. They were a co-op, so everyone was on the same money, whether you were the techie, whether you were the roadie, whether you were on sound, or whether you were the lead singer. And the bus that we travelled in was called the Great White Ghost, and it was a converted kind of big white van where they had Aer Lingus airplane seats. So there was no suspension. So I went across Europe, like literally somewhere between the floor and the ceiling, because you just bounced around. And I thought because I was the only girl in the band, I'd get special treatment and get looked after. No. So that was very grounding and a really good thing to do. Because I think that, like, you know, and I know I'm skipping forward, but when I did No Frontiers and I worked away with crews, I thought, you're just one cog. You're one cog in a wheel. So there's no room for being a diva. I probably was a bit of a nightmare in my early 20s with Moving Hearts. I found it tough. It was very tough.
Oh, so you're on the road with them in a van, and you're doing all of Europe.
We went all over Europe. We went to America, and I remember we went.
And when you toured America, was that on the road too, or were you flying?
It was on the road. I mean, we had hotels, but I remember we were in New York and we were doing the Bottom Line in New York, which was a really big gig, and it was kind of like everybody played the Bottom Line, and we did 2 shows. And I always remember going on stage, and there's a guy down the back for the whole gig going, "Where's Christy? Where's Christy? What's your one doing up there? Where's Christy?" And I came off stage during one of the instrumentals, and my friend Cleo, who lived in New York, was there, and I bawling my eyes out, and then I have to go back on. And I think,
and you're only in your early 20s. This is amazing.
The kind of stuff that destroys you. And I often think about it. I think
makes you.
If it was me now, and that happened, I'd say, if you were a true Moving Hearts fan, you'd know that Christy Moore left the band 3 years ago, and if you're not happy, there's the box office, get your money back and fuck off. That's what I say now, you know. But back then, like, it crushed me. And then I went through all that. I'm shit. I'm crap. I can't sing. You know, all that shite that you put yourself through.
That is. So how long did you stay with Moving Hearts, touring around?
Too long. I did one single with them called State Music, and but I mean, you know, parted on good terms. Noel Eccles, who was the percussionist in Moving Hearts, he and I were best friends. For my mother wanted me to marry Noel. I mean, because he was also in the symphony orchestra, so that was his proper job.
Yeah, proper job.
And I took Mum to a couple of concerts, and I remember like an opera festival, and I think it was the Olympia, and Noel was in the pit, and Mum and I went to see him, and she was staring down at Noel, and she had put her eye on Noel, so she used to invite him over for dinner, and the good room would be opened, and he'd go home, and all the nice china, and I'd be looking at the china going, I've never seen that before in my life, and he'd go home with jars of marmalade. And I met him. I haven't seen Noel for at least 10 years, and we bumped into each other, and we ended up going for dinner a couple of days later in the Troc, and my mother was still alive, and I said to him towards the end of dinner, I said, I have a present from you from Mum, and he went, marmalade? I said, yes, it was marmalade. She was bitterly disappointed, but then she met Barry, and then that was it. So you know, there was never any bad feeling between me and Moving Hearts. It just wasn't right.
Did you get an agent while you were doing? I'm just thinking, there you are in New York. You're really young. You're really good at what you're doing. It's so funny. You look back at, you know.
Yeah,
maybe
I mean, I should have. And that's one thing I always felt, that I never had anyone in my corner.
In your corner,
I felt quite alone, and I did. I mean, I ended up doing, and I'm kind of thinking the time frame, this was definitely afterwards, through Noel Pearson, I ended up doing Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris in the Gate with Terry Neeson and John Kavanagh and Enda Oates. That was the first time I did a theatre piece, and I thought,
when was that?
I was 24, so it was after. I think it was definitely after.
And so there was all the Jacques Brel.
Yeah, and I loved it.
I love those songs.
I absolutely loved it, and I loved being in the Gate Theatre. And through Noel Pearson, he got me an agent briefly, and I can't think of his name now, and I shouldn't know his name. He was in with Neil and I played the Irish Drunk in the bar, Dara O'Malley. Dara O'Malley was, and he was an actor but an agent, and I was with him very briefly, and then he moved to Portugal. And you know that scene in With Nail and I when they go into the bar, and there's the drunk in the corner going,
he's threatening them.
That's Dara O'Malley, gorgeous man, lovely man. And so it was Noel Pearson said, you need an agent. But it's the time frame that
but
I
is it
can't
a vote
remember.
for an agent for singing?
No, I think it was more kind of maybe looking at theatre stuff, or, and I suppose because I was like, Leslie's story is quite different to mine in that she was part of Intu Inua and they became huge.
Yeah.
And they, she was part of this band, that she was protected by them and looked after by the band. Whereas I felt sometimes maybe I was, and I don't mean that in a horrible way, but I was used by, like, we need a girl singer. So, I did get signed to Virgin Music on the strength of a couple of songs that I co-wrote with Ed Dara. But it was terrible, really, because Ed should have got signed, not me, or we should have been signed together.
Yeah.
And I went over to London. I was 24, 25 at this stage, and I think they gave me, I don't know, it was a big check back then. And Barry always says, if you hadn't gone mad with that money, we could be living in the south of France now. Because my mother said, buy a house. And I'm going, what do I want a house for God's sake? So I went to New York to meet songwriters, spent like 6 weeks in New York meeting songwriters. I was on the batter. I came home with a fiance. I came home with a feckin' fiance an American fiance that I met at a Count Basie orchestra. The celebration of the Count Basie orchestra, and the members of the orchestra that were still alive performed, and it was a black tie do because my friend Cleo was working with the fancy magazine and got invited to all these things. And anyway, I met this guy Mark, who was from Dallas, Texas, and he worked for Pepsi Cola. He worked he was kind of involved in the Tina Turner Pepsi Cola deal. So I came like at 24, like, will I get engaged? I get engaged with the crack. I didn't actually think I had to get married. So because my mother was beside herself with the excitement when I came home with this tall Texan, and that was all over and done with in a couple of weeks. And I still have the engagement ring, and Mia wears it. And there's one other engagement ring. Somebody else, and I call them my scalps. And I know Mia's going out tonight. She's wearing my scalps.
But did you live in London then? Did you move?
I did. I moved to London when I did the first series of Mega Mix with Kevin Sharkey.
Yeah, how did the telly come in?
Billy McGrath, totally through Billy McGrath, because Billy McGrath and Declan Lowney both did producer.
Lowney, who did and directed Father Ted. Yeah.
So
did he start on RTE?
God no, he started. Yeah, he started.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So they both did these producer-director courses at the same time.
RTE used to do that.
And so Billy, as part of Billy's end of course thing, he had to put together a sort of 15-minute long magazine type program, and I was in Moving Hearts, and he got Liam Mackey to present it and me to be a guest on it, and we did it. There was somewhere in Ballsbridge, there was RT had a tiny little small studio that they do small programs from. We did it there. And then afterwards, whoever the powers that be saw the thing and they liked me and Liam together. And then Billy McGrath passed with flying colours his producer director course, as did Declan. And so the first thing we did was TV Gaga. So I was in South America. I was actually singing in a song festival, a song by Brendan Graham, who went on to write that big Eurovision, what did he write? Oh, Brendan Graham, he's written friggin', he's got one huge song that's been recorded gazillions of times and it escapes me.
Was that one of the Irish Eurovision? He
did do an Irish Eurovision one, but it's another. It's Brendan Graham. And he was a friend of my father's.
Yeah.
It's Flying Without Wings. That's it. He wrote that.
He wrote Flying Without Wings?
He wrote Flying Without Wings.
Because is that song covered by Boyzone or one of them?
Boyzone or Westlife.
Oh, the Westlife.
Like Celine Dion, I think. I mean, like loads of big stars.
And you always hear it in church.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and he was a lovely man. So I went to South America with him to sing one of his songs. We went to Chile. I mean, when I look back on it now, knowing what I know about politics, like no interest in politics, I would not have gone to Chile. I mean, Pinochet was still in power. you know, I knew nothing, and so I mean, I came home from South America and went straight into Moving Hearts, and I thought if they knew that I'd been to South America, they might not have been so happy with me. I hadn't a clue.
Yeah.
You know, people would say, "Do you want to go to South America to sing in a festival?" Okay. "Do you want to be a TV presenter?" Okay.
You were a kid.
I was a kid.
But the opportunities were phenomenal. Then you had your TV career.
Yeah, and that really was because of Billy, and so we did TV Gaga. I think I did 2 seasons of TV Gaga, and then Declan Lowney was doing Megamix, and so he approached me about doing Megamix, which I did. I think we did 3 seasons of, and the first place we did it was the Cathedral Club up by Christchurch.
Oh yes,
and
I remember that. Yeah,
I mean, God, it was incredible, and we used to get bands coming on. They'd come to us before they'd fly to London to do Top of the Pops, so we'd be their warm-up gigs. So we had we'd all the big bands of the 80s, and then we had Womack and Womack, and we had Bros before they became Bros. The two twin brothers, and I remember they were cheeky little feckers, and they took a shine to me, and they wanted me to come out to the Late Late Show and hang out with them. And I think it was going to be an eeny, meeny, miny, mo situation. It wasn't. I didn't go, but we'd all the big bands, Erasure, Alison Moyet, we'd everyone who was anyone did our show, and Kevin and I became really good friends. And Declan directed that, and Anita Natara, who went on to be a writer, and she's very sadly passed away.
Yeah, I remember.
She was a trainee director on
I remember Mina, because I knew Dervla Walsh.
That's why Dervla worked on that as well.
Yeah. Oh, did she? Yeah, I know Dervla from Tubbercurry, and we both studied communication studies in DCU, and I remember she introduced me to Anita when she was working on the Late Late Show.
That's right, because Anita literally was kind of the sort of, I think on the second series she directed some of them, and then from there she went on to the Late Late Show. But Declan Lowney was his kind of baby. It was his baby.
Oh wow!
And it was great fun.
So you did absolutely loads of telly. So you've done all that singing to really high level. You've done all this telly work, and then usually now if somebody was doing that now, they go, now you really need a good talent agent.
No, I didn't even think like that. I mean, that's it. When I remember reading, I think it was an interview with Patti Smith, and she said, mind your career when you're young, because it's when you're young and when you know that it will serve you well when you're older. And I don't think she meant on it doesn't have to be a huge level, just minding you, that keep a steady grip on your career, keep gigging, keep engaging. I've only seen that really and realised that since I turned 50 and came back to music. I just thought I want to sing again. So I just started doing little gigs, and then I got a gig with a big band, and then somebody hears you and then asks you to do something else, and then suddenly back then, it never occurred to me that I needed.
Yeah, but it just shows how super talented you were. That, I mean, it just all happened organically like that. Tell me about working with Stock. I remember I was talking to you once, and you just threw into the conversation, I worked with Stock, Aiken and Waterman, because they were huge.
They were huge. I mean, I shared a flat in London with Suzanne Rattigan, who amazing singer, tiny petite woman with that huge voice, that kind of voice that can do any sort of, literally she can sound like anything. And she was very much the go-to session singer in London, one of a handful of singers, and I wasn't anywhere near that group. She worked with Roger Waters, she worked with everyone, and she was Stock Aitken and Waterman's one of their favourite singers. So it was through her that I got some session work. And I had the problem with my hearing, and I remember being in a session one day and having a mad mix in my ears, and I said, I'm a bit deaf in my left ear, because I had a mastoid in my ear when I was 7, and my hearing was slightly damaged. And then they thought it was hilarious. Let's get the deaf Irish singer in. And I have ever since been
deaf. What was deaf Irish deaf actor, and what were the
blind dancer?
Blind dancer.
Yeah, they thought this was hilarious, and my hearing obviously has deteriorated quite significantly over the years, and that was always something I freak out about. Is my tuning okay? Is my tuning okay? Because I just did learn. I learned to listen with my head voice. So I remember. Who did we work with? I think we did something for, and it's kind of hazy. I didn't do a huge amount for Stock Aitken and Waterman. It was through Suzanne. I think we did. We did ghost vocals for Bananarama because they couldn't be asked to come into the studio to do their own demos. So when they were demoing them, we'd go in and just do the demos. And then there was another band, and I can't think, they were black girls, and they were quite big at the time. They were quite massive, and we did all the backing vocals on their stuff. But Suzanne, like, it was Suzanne's gig. She did Rick Astley. She did.
Wow.
And it was,
she's an Irish singer, yeah?
Yeah, and she lives here now again. And she's a good mate of Sean Miller's. And
yeah.
And she actually has a thing you should look up. It's called 50 Near Misses, because she had a big American record deal in the early 90s. And like that, I think they wanted to kind of make Suzanne into some kind of pop starry thing. But Suzanne was a serious singer-songwriter, writes great lyrics. And she has a blog called 50 Near Misses, and it's the story of all the songs. And it's really, I've read it. It's really, really.
Wow, I want to find out more about her.
She's fascinating. Yeah, she's really good, really talented. It's someone actually that. It's funny, I'm not a competitive person, and it's why I've always hated things like X Factor, because I thought singing is not a competitive sport. And and when I hear them going, oh, and your runs are amazing, I'm going, oh, shut up.
Yeah.
But that and people, people try to pit Leslie and I against each other in a competitive way. And I think, and particularly as you get older, I've made lots of friends in the last 14, 15 years with new singers, and like Karen Coleman and myself. Karen Coleman and I were in the Commitments touring band I did for nearly 2 years. We are like that. And I have these group of women around me now, and I'm around them, other singers, and we are each other's champions.
This is the way that it should be. Yeah. But I think the world pictures you that you're always going to be compared. You were the best looking one, you had this, that immediately a few women get on. I know this from being in the Newless for years. The comparisons, and also with female comics it's the same. You this whatever. In fact, we're all working in the same art form.
And would you find, like, now with like the younger female comedians, are they competitive or are they supportive?
Flo, I don't honestly know, because I am doing my own shows, and I'm
I think the signs are supportive. There's a lot of girls working together and that. We know Aidy McQueen and Sophia Wren and things like that.
That is right.
There's a good sign of solidarity there.
There is a very good sign of solidarity, and I see them on social media making supportive comments to each other, although that might be optics.
I know.
That might be optics.
Yeah.
And,
it's not. It's positive, Anne.
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm talking sincerely about it, you know.
But it could be optics too.
But it could be. But I think it's nice and sincere because I choose to.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think it's far more, he's a stirrer. I think it's far more beneficial to people, that just as human beings, you feel so much better about, you know, I've gone to my friends' gigs, like at Vicar Street. I mean, I had 6 or 7 women there. They're all singers, and I knew they were whooping and rooting for Leslie and I, you know. And
that is wonderful.
I think it's wonderful because it's like, you know, I hear a new young singer, this amazing English singer called Emma Smith. She looks to me to be no more than 30. She could be a bit older. Extraordinary jazz singer, like extraordinary, like just what she can do.
What's
with
her name again?
Emma Smith.
Yeah.
And there's a girl called Samara Joy, and I look at them and I just think they're next level. It's kind of like athletes. You know, the way athletes today are not like athletes of yesterday.
I really think that with comedy, like you see somebody like Joanne McNally come along, and they're really funny, but then they just have this vision. I can go to that level, and then I'm listening to all the stuff that you did and whatever, and you know, and I'm thinking back to like stuff I would have done. You obviously don't mention the Newlers again, but with the Newlers and the breaks we had and the level we worked to,
and what you were doing was groundbreaking. I mean, it was,
and it was, and I've seen things where we'd completely written out history.
I know.
I find that
it's hard.
I find that. Do you find that sometimes you go and things like, and there were, I saw this headline in the Times, and there was Irish female comedians were conspicuous by their absence until 1996.
I know.
And
You're going, what?
Yeah. The Newless were all over the place by then, and that can be.
That's somebody not doing their homework as well, as far as I'm concerned. Not doing their research properly. But it is amazing the way But then there can be a dismissal from certain generations of what's gone before. What's gone before.
That's it, yeah.
There was a comment made about him, and he doesn't like me talking about him. But there was a comment made overheard on a train about my husband on the way to or from Kilkenny that Barry Murphy was still relevant. I was going.
Were they?
And I
What was he still relevant?
No, that someone said he was still relevant. And they may as well have said, in spite of his age, in spite of his blah, blah, blah. I said, who gets to decide who's relevant? Who gets to decide that relevance disappears at a certain age? You know, if anything, I mean, I come from a generation, I remember when I started in RTE, the women that I met, Thelma Mansfield was like one of these amazing women. I knew I could learn from her, and she was lovely to me, and I know her. She's very close to a good friend of mine, so I've had lunches with her. She's as lovely now as she was then. But I remember being so respectful of her as a young 20-something-year-old coming into RTE. Not that kind of get out of my way, I'm coming through, which I feel now. I feel that a little bit. Maybe it's in the comedy world, and which is my world, but there is sometimes I feel that it's a bit like that.
It does feel like that, and it does feel immensely. I think everybody is aware of how competitive it is and everything. My thing was always the space for everybody, but I enjoy now not having to engage too much with that whole dynamic and just do my own shows lane. Because, like you, I really love the art of what I do, and I really love exploring. And also, we're very lucky that at the point we're at, and we're still working, because our audience have the time and resources to go out.
And they do go out.
And here's the thing, they've always said for going to shows that it's the women who say, let's go to this, and the women who buy the tickets. And I think I really noticed this observing, say, Joanne McNally's career. I think that now there's a generation of women going, I'm not going to say to my fella, hey, let's go to this. I'm going with the girls.
Totally.
And it's girl time.
Yeah.
And women are the ones who spend the money on the tickets,
Absolutely.
go to shows and support women.
Absolutely.
So, and it's a brilliant moment, and there's a huge audience, older audience out there.
And there is there's a lovely jazz venue up near Guinness's, Arthur's, and
oh, I know, it's near where I live.
And Arthur's, I've done a couple of gigs there, but
it's fab, isn't it?
But they do, like Honor Heffernan did a gig there a couple of months ago with Carol Nelson, who's a piano player, both women in their 60s. But the gig was at like 3 p.m, you know, and I thought, isn't that nice now? You can go to the gig and be home in bed by 8 o'clock with your Horlicks.
But the thing is, you just keep doing it. But like I said, I really observed it at your gig in Vicar St. I thought, I don't even want to hear mention of age or anything. I thought that thing was very funny, you know, Bend and Squint was hilarious. But let it go then, because we just want to see superb artists at work. Yeah. And there is space for everybody. And I think the thing is to enjoy the moment, but it's just listening to all the phenomenal things you do. It is amazing when you think there's a sense that can be forgotten, or
of course it can. Of course it can. I mean, listen, there was something in the paper about me a couple of weeks ago, and it said former TV presenter, and former TV presenter, and I thought, yeah, I am a former TV presenter, but Jesus, I'm so much more. You know?
It's so like if I was writing, I would always do a little search. I'd chat GTV now and go and put in a respectful bio.
Because you're down with the AI and
it's just being respectful to people and knowing that when you say like that headline in the Irish Times, which I will mention time and again, because I think it's just so outrageous.
There's no excuse for getting that kind of information wrong.
But it's also. It's lazy journalism, but it's being respectful to people and the work they've done. Tell me about working with a certain ratio.
Oh gosh, and a certain ratio, that was when I was signed to Virgin Music, and I suppose they didn't quite know what to do with me. And as I said, it should have been Ed Dara who got the publishing deal, not me, or they should have put us together because we were a team. But I was naive enough and cruel, and it was cruel of me to kind of move on the way I did without a backward glance towards Ed. We've long got over that, and she knows, I mean, you know, but amazing songwriter. So they tried to put me with different songwriters, and a certain ratio funnily reminded me of Moving Hearts a bit, in the sense that freaking extraordinary musicians, but their record company felt they needed something a little bit more oomph. up front. And so through Virgin, and I was signed by this gorgeous Japanese man, beautiful, beautiful man, and we're Facebook friends still. He ended up running Virgin in the States, and he signed Nirvana, and he discovered his name was Kaz Utsunomiya, and he used to say to me, at the end of day, Fro, and I hope I don't get into trouble with saying this, sorry, and at end of day, Fro, I make you number one Japan. Yeah, he didn't make me number one in Japan, but and he looked like he had a look of John Roche. He had long, bluey black hair there, and he was the most gorgeous, gentle man. And I think Richard Branson became very much his right hand man. But he signed me, so it was through Kaz that I got an introduction to A Certain Ratio, and I was at the time in the Gate Theatre doing Jacques Brel. And their manager came over to see me, came to see the show, and then I flew over and I met the band, did a couple of rehearsals with them. We shared a rehearsal room. I was with them for a year, and I did one album, and the album, it's on Spotify and all. It's called Good Together, and actually on YouTube there's extraordinary the strawberry shorts, the freaking strawberry shorts I was wearing. What was I thinking? It was like from here up I was a sophisticated lady, and then I was trying to kind of fit into the Manchester groove, so I'm wearing these white shorts with big red strawberries all over them. It's mad. And that was Town and Country. We did that for that concert for ITV, but I hadn't seen that in like 20 years, and then somebody told me it was on YouTube. And so I did an album with them, and I toured with them, and ultimately, I mean, I think that the record company wanted me maybe to move more towards up the front, but the band, it was their band, it was their sound, they wanted, and they're still gigging as they are, but being on stage with them, they would like, towards the end of the show, they'd all swap instruments. So the drummer would be on bass, the bass would be on drums. Wow. They were like, the trumpet player would be on guitar, the guitar would be on trumpet. They were freaking phenomenal. So I spent a year in Manchester, but we shared rehearsal rooms.
We were a year in Manchester?
We were a year in Manchester. And now I was toing and froing, but I was there a lot, and we did our album. We did the album in one of those, I mean, you think of it now, people do their albums in their bedrooms with their little mixing desks. Back then, it's all King's New Clothes stuff, hundreds of thousands. We're in this residential studio with catering and tennis courts, and I don't think I feel up to a vocal today. Leave it till tomorrow. You know what I mean? And this is all going ka-ching, ka-ching. And, the bands never realised this is your money that's being spent. And the producer, I remember we had a big mad party one night because the producer of our album, whose name I can't remember, had produced Mark Almond and Something's Got a Hold of My Heart. And it became number one. So we had a big mad number one party. But I was thinking, not our number one. Yeah. And I did the album with them. And then, so we would rehearse. We did this mad gig with New Order, Happy Mondays and us on a Christmas 1990 something in GMX, which was an indoor 10,000 seater. And we shared a rehearsal space with Happy Mondays because it was before they broke. So they would rehearse at night time, all night, and we were all very professional and together, and we'd rehearse during the day and they would take it over at night. I remember Sean Ryder, I was terrified of him. He was like the most intimidating guy. He wasn't, he was a pudding, you know. So so it was, and Manchester was such a different scene to Dublin. I mean, it was like maybe what had happened in Dublin in the 80s was happening, and that whole music thing was growing. So there was Swing Out Sister, we'd hang out with them, and we used to go to the Hacienda on a Wednesday night. That was Wednesday night.
The Hacienda
on the stage with yo-yos on a Wednesday night. It was all.
And my mum moved back to Manchester in the 80s, and we used to go out club. What I loved about Manchester was you had all different scenes. So you kind of have a club scene. The Hacienda was taken off, but then there was a big alternative scene. There was all these rock clubs. There was all these kind of subcultures. And it was so lively and so much fun.
So just fun. I mean, I spent my days in Manchester, literally, we'd rehearse all day. They were writing songs. They were great guys to be around, and I kind of slotted in. But after one album, we knew, I mean, I did want to have a solo career. I just thought I could spend my life ending up in other people's bands, and it was beginning to feel like that. It was like that somebody would go, oh, let's pick her up and we'll plonk her into this band or plonk her into that band.
So is that why you moved back to Ireland then?
Yeah,
You said,
and I mean, I still had a place here. I mean, I was renting an apartment here, so I was toing and froing from
you were to and
Manchester,
from,
but
you
I was
said,
there a
no, I
lot.
want to, you came back in and thought, I'm going to focus on.
Yeah, and I mean, the band, I think, felt the same. I mean, they did.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like when the album was done, it came to its natural conclusion. And I did, like, maybe 10 years ago, they played somewhere in Dublin, and Baz and I went down and went back to say hi, and it was they were exactly the same as they were, you know.
Wow.
So when I came back, I did have a sort of a wilderness kind of period, you know, really where it was like everything stopped. You know, that thing of just...
You kind of have to go through that, I think, go through, it's like a fairy tale. You go through the wilderness to find your happiness, but you kind of have to go through that to make the break, go to the next phase.
Yeah.
And did you have a vision?
No, I never had a fucking vision. No, that's the problem. I reckon if I'd had a vision, I would have
I know, but you worked to such a phenomenal level.
It was literally me just, it was like I was a rolling stone. I was literally just kind of rolling along and, you know, and going with whatever direction. I never had a purpose or a plan.
Tell us what happened then after a certain ratio.
After a certain ratio, and I'm trying to think what age I was then. I split up with the guy that I've been with for a long time, and that was a very important thing for me to do. And I moved in with my older brother in Monkstown. He had a house in Monkstown, and it's brilliant now because I'm getting all the timelines as I visualise them. Through Bill Whelan, Bill started working on a festival in the Abbey Theatre, the Yeats Festival, with this American, he was a professor of English in Amory University, an Irish-American, Jim Flannery, a very eccentric and lovely man. And so he got sponsorship to do 5 years of Yeats every summer at the Abbey Theatre. It was in the Peacock. And so Bill wrote this incredible music around Yeats's words. And the first year I recorded them all in Bill's studio. And then the second year, so the first year I wasn't in I was literally just, my voice was there in the theatre, but I got to know Jim Flannery. And then the second year I was cast by Jim, and then I was in it for every year for 5 years. So this was a real introduction into theatre.
That's amazing,
And then we did Beckett. We did
in the Abbey. So that's the main stage of Ireland.
It was the Abbey, but it was in the Peacock. But we did.
It was the Abbey, the main stage of Ireland.
That's exactly it, Anne. It was the main stage of Ireland, and we did. And so that was for 5 years, and then through that. Then I got, and I was on tour. Then I joined the Commitments, and because I was living with Baz, and we were living in a little flat on.
Baz being, for the people who don't know, Barry Murphy, who was I went to college with Barry.
I know you did. Yeah. I know you did. So Baz and I were living together, and we were living in an apartment, and we've been together a couple of years. And then I got a call about would I be into doing backing vocals on tour with the Commitments. I was doing nothing at the time, and money was tight. And this was good money. And I said, feck it, you know, it's abroad, I'll do it. So I joined the Commitments touring band as one of the backing singers. And it was hilarious because, like, the further into America, I remember doing a gig one night and this woman coming up to me afterwards. And there was always contractually, there had to be three cast members from the film in the band, and they could be anybody, and the rest was made up of, there were 12 of us on stage, big brass section, and then Karen Coleman and myself. The girls never did it because they all went on to have amazing careers. But this woman coming up to me in the Bronx somewhere and going, I've seen the movie 10 times and you were fabulous.
You just go, thank you.
I did. I said thank you, and then Karen and I would argue about which one did she think each of us was. And I did that for probably about a year and a half. And then while I was away...
Did you enjoy it?
I did initially. And then, like, this was friggin' slog. This was probably the hardest work I ever did because it wasn't a hotel every night.
You were sleeping on the bus?
Yeah. So, you know, the first time you get onto a tour bus and you go, oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
What? The lounge, the kitchen, like the bunk beds. I used to call them the coffins, you know. And 2 girls and about 14 guys. And then we had, you know, you'd have the replacements coming in. You'd have the young fellow who's on his first tour. And then, like...
It kicks into slog.
Hard work. And that kind of moment of, you know, being on the tour bus and then realising actually it's 6 weeks on a tour bus and maybe 3 hotels in the 6 weeks. And we would have a lot of guys in the band that would, you know, because I did for a year and a half, so there'd be changeovers, never with the cast members from the movie, but there'd be a young guitarist of 23 who's never done it before, so who's just so excited. And I do remember like hearing the nighttime noises of men, you know, who are sleeping in the bunk above you, and I'm lying there going, I was 33 at this stage, thinking my life's a tragedy when I have to listen to some guy above me, you know, who just watched a porn movie with the lads in the lounge, that they've waited until Karen and I've gone to bed, and my bunk was, for the first tour, never again after that, for the first tour my bunk was near the lounge, and then I'd move up to the other end of the bus. So they'd wait until Kaz and I'd go to bed, and then the movies come out, and I'd be lying in the coffin going, this is tragic. So after that first tour, I made sure I was at the other end of the bus. So we'd be driving through the night. We had this in the UK. We had the same driver, a guy called Chris. So you'd wake up the next morning, and I always in my head I say it was Bradford or Leeds. I actually don't know where it was, but I remember waking up outside an Olympia type of theatre. So you're down a little lane on the bus, and you know you haven't got to a laundry in 10 days or whatever, and you're sort of, you know, picking up things going, I wonder could I get away with this? And the two black dresses, I don't know how many black dresses I had, but I remember Karen and I going into this freezing cold theatre at like 10 in the morning, finding the dressing rooms, sold out gig that night, 1,200 people, and we're washing our dresses in the sink, and then we're hanging them on hangers in front of a 3-bar radiator, and then putting them on that night while they're still damp. And then we hit the stage, and the lights are on top of us, and next minute all this steam is just freaking, and I'm looking at Cass going, we're hot, we're hot, get steam rising off. I mean, freaking how we didn't die of double pneumonia and triple pneumonia and quadruple pneumonia. You know, it was that kind of stuff. And everyone goes, oh, it's so glamorous. I'm going, glamorous me. Oh.
This is the whole thing. Had you signed on for the whole thing? So you're like, so then at what point did it, you know, because it's always fun when you start.
Anne was in that position only last year, travelling around in a van for a month.
2.5 months. I got an opportunity to do a show with a menopause doctor, and part of it was yes, my comedy was around menopause, but I don't want it all to be framed this way, whatever. But it was very interesting seeing all the theatres, but gets tired very quickly.
Yeah, and it's and you know, I was 33 then. I thought I was ancient, and when you think of it, I mean,
when you think of it
now, in a million years.
And do you think that the framing of female performance and age has totally changed?
Oh yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of female performers breaking out in the late 30s now.
I know.
Whereas I think when we were younger, if you hadn't made it by the late 30s, good night.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah.
What are you doing?
When people talked about getting into your 30s, it was like, you know, I mean, it's all changed now, and women, like I'm 63, and I certainly don't feel I'm just beginning, but I'm actually right now, I think I'm having the best time generally in my life. I'm very happy with where my life is, where my kids are at, Baz, all of us, just where we're at, and also thinking like these opportunities that have happened that I never thought would happen again. I had said to Bren Berry, like a couple of years ago, we'd gone out for dinner with Bren and his wife Karen,
he runs
Vicar Street, and they're good mates, and his wife Karen and I are good friends, and they're wonderful people, and Bren was brilliant.
He's supportive.
He's amazing. He's
of
just
everybody.
He really is. But I said to Bren years ago, probably about 5 years ago, can I do Vicar Street, like just once? I mean, even if like a charity night, can I do a song? And Brent said, of course. And I thought of that last week when I was on stage. I said, well, this isn't just a song, you know, it's a whole night. Now I did end up doing a charity thing in Vicar Street, but I never thought, I mean, because Vicar Street, I suppose, I feel Vicar Street is like a home for me, in that, like Baz, I remember in 2002, Après Match did 20 gigs back to back. When they did their, like Après Match sort of took off. The doormen are her pals. Chuck came backstage to give me a hug. Chuck, Derek,
they're
Jake.
so nice.
They're gorgeous men, and they've been there forever. And that's always a sign of a great place, well run. Their family.
And don't you find that, like on stage there, it just feels really intimate. The sound is perfect.
The sound is great. It's the best
actually,
room.
there's something that Vicar Street opened at the same time as HQ in Middle Abbey Street, and there was this sense that they were going to be in competition. But the HQ Abbey Street just never had that bright vibe as a performance room. Whereas Vicar Street immediately, it's loads of acts' favourite room.
Yeah, it is. And we went to see Lake Street Dive there, who are a band from Boston. One of my favourite bands.
I saw you posting that on...
I just love them.
Yeah.
And they come back once a year, and I know they do Vicar Street, and they always work with Aiken, because they did their first gig in Ireland in Workman's probably 10 years ago. And the other night, John Zambetti, he's, you know, the actress Jane Seymour.
Yes.
John is her partner.
Yeah.
And she would have been there, except that she had an early call. She's filming Harry Wilde. And I've met them through friends of mine. And John he's a doctor, but he has a band called the Malibus, and big into his music. So he bought a ticket and came to Vicar Street. But he's seen me in the Coach House in Wicklow. So he's just said to me, he said, I saw him yesterday, and he said, you know, I thought it was going to be like 120 people or whatever. And he said, I walk into this room, and he was blown away by Vicar Street. He just thought, this room is amazing.
Yeah.
I came, but while I was on tour with the Commitments, I got a call from Michael Colgan in the Gate saying they were casting A Midsummer Night's Dream, and they would like. Joe Dowling was. I was about to say conducting. Joe Dowling was, it shows how much I know about theatre. Joe Dowling was directing. He was conducting all the actors, conducting the actors. And they were doing a very kind of rock and roll contemporary version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And they had an idea that they wanted Titania to be kind of like Madonna, the look, the sort of vibe, rock and roll. And they wanted me to audition. Now, I was in the UK on tour at the time, and the powers that be within the Commitments wouldn't give me the time off to come back and audition. And I thought, fuck this, I'm going to audition. So with Karen Coleman's help, I snuck out. I can't remember exactly where we were and where we were to be that night, but Karen covered for me. So I got off the tour bus, wherever it was, got a flight home at the crack of dawn, straight to the Gate Theatre, did the audition, taxi straight back out to the airport, and got on a different plane to wherever the next place was. It all fell into place that wherever it was. And they were none the wiser that I had done the audition. And then about 5 days later, I got a call offering me the part.
And was the timing of that perfect to win the
Perfect. It was all perfect. So I think I left the Commitments and then went into rehearsal for Midsummer Night's Dream.
Amazing.
Within a couple of months, whenever it was. And but Karen covered me for that.
And how was that, doing the...
I loved it. And I mean, you know, I'm working with actors who I suppose looked at me and just thought, you know, she's a singer. She doesn't belong here. And that was it. And then there were others in the cast who were wonderful and welcoming to me. They were amazing. And there was a big cast and a big production. And like the whole forest scenes where they were inflatable and it was all very phallic, you know. Titania emerged from a sort of vagina and the trees were all kind of... you know, phallus type things, basically. But all very exciting at the time. But I do remember it ran in the summer and we had a load of Spanish students coming and they were kind of being forced to go and see Shakespeare. And you could see their faces at the beginning going, oh my God. And by the end of it, they just, because it was contemporary, it was rock and roll, it was fun. I knew they all loved it. And for me, because I love Yeats and I love Joyce and I love Shakespeare because I love the musicality of the language. So I remember for the audition having to do Titania's monologue, and I just thought there's just such music in this language. So I loved it.
So you did that, and then did you...
Then went on to work in the Royal Shakespeare and straight into the West End and Broadway, darling. No, of course. Did I follow it up?
And said,
yes, yeah, exactly. And you know, I'm trying to think, what did I do after that?
Because you did loads of seasons of a travel programme on RTÉ.
Oh, I did No Frontiers, yeah. I mean, that was funny because Luke, my son, who's nearly 29, was 16 months old, and Barry had gone to Edinburgh for the month. And I was going to come over halfway through for a weekend, but we were living on Pembroke Road at the time. And I remember when he left, I thought, I'm on my own with the baby. I bawled my eyes out. And Gerald Heffernan rings from Frontier Films, and he was going on about this travel show and whatever. And I was getting irritated because I had a squalling baby in my arms. And I was saying, Barry's in Edinburgh. I can give you a number for him in Edinburgh. And he said, no, I want to talk to you. And it was Ferdy and McGanna who had suggested me. And I go, what? And then a week later, my parents and wonderful parents, and my brother stepped in and looked after Luke, and I did a trip to France, and it was kind of, let's see how it goes. So I did the one trip to France, and then they came back and they watched it back, and they said they would like you to be the main presenter.
Wow.
Are you free to go to Zimbabwe in 10 days? And I'm like, well, I think so. So it was kind of, you know, it was amazing. And so I did it for 4 years. And there are moments that, you know, those kind of standout moments that you, and one of them being flying over Victoria Falls in a helicopter with no health and safety. They'd taken the door off. Our cameraman was strapped to the inside, but I still had the arse of his trousers in my hands, holding on to him when he's filming. And they use that in their opening titles. There's a rainbow underneath and a bull, elephant, mother and baby, trunk to tail, walking along the edge of the Victoria Falls. It was like...
So did you travel all over the world then?
I did travel all over the world. It's like, a lot of it's hazy. I did, but like it got tougher as you went on because budgets get smaller.
Yeah.
So I remember flying to Sydney on a Wednesday, and the following day having to climb Sydney Harbour Bridge, you know, where you're in these kind of, you have to link onto, and that was a bit mad. But I was back home on Monday. So it was that intense. Yeah. So, but like we went to Mexico, went to the little island Cozumel, Zimbabwe, Africa was probably the most, that just stands out. Tunisia.
While you were doing that, you have a new baby, and
I had Luke, and then Mia was born when I was 40, and they were due to start filming another new series, and Mia was 3 weeks old, and I thought, you know, obviously I can't continue. So what I'd hoped was to maybe bow out gracefully, but by then they had found Catherine Thomas, and I got what I call a Dear John letter in the post. And I remember I was sitting there and I got the letter going, you know, thank you for this, thank you for your service. And
just like that, like a letter.
Pretty much, yeah, wow. Pretty much. It's as you know,
that's the biz.
It's the business, and you have to get over yourself. And I remember looking at my gorgeous new 3-week-old baby and thinking, I don't care. And I was ready to go. And you know, the programme, the style of the show changed considerably when Catherine, you know, she had this youthful, she was very young and she was brilliant. I thought she was brilliant at it. And I always say my claim to fame is I presented it when nobody watched it.
To do a show, you have to do a show on your own. You have to work with young female musicians.
I'd love to.
And you have to, I'll talk to you after about that. But because I don't want to be saying that's what I saw when I was.
There's one thing though, and it leads on from, you know, having Mia as a 3-week-old. Within a couple of days of getting the Dear John letter, I get a call from Voice Bank, the agency I was with, and they said, "Can you be in Windmill Lane at like at 2:00? This is at midday." And you can bring the baby. And luckily for me, she was a good baby. But it amazed me that they spend all this money on this huge TV campaign and book the voiceover last minute. And I said, who's it for? And they said, Vodafone. And I said, where did you say it was? And what time? So I arrive in. And as I was walking into the studio, I could hear Jerry Fish's True Friends Never Part. First time I ever heard it. That was used in the campaign. And I walked in and there's loads of people there. And I thought, oh, this is a big one. And I ended up doing it for 4 years. And it was this is my voiceover voice. Life's better with Vodafone. How are you? And I used to call it the How are you campaign. And it was 4 years.
And amazing. And that was everything, telly, everything.
It was covered. It was four, and that was literally within days of the other thing. So, I mean, for that period of, you know, I felt not involved in the industry and not performing live. I was doing bits. Yeah. And then I got my kids out working. I had Mia at age 7 did an animated series, and it was like, got my kids working. I said, somebody had to pay for my shoes.
Your connection to the business was always there because you're going into the studios, you're always meeting people. Yeah. So you're always there.
Yeah.
And now, what is the vision? So then, in your 50s, you went, I'm back.
Yes, and at literally
you have
50.
Kept singing, working, and you're doing all sorts of gigs.
Yeah, I sing with the big band. There's a wonderful Dublin big band, the Hothouse Big Band, and like 17-piece big swing band, and then there's another band that have just started in Kilkenny, another big band that play in the Left Bank once a month. I've done one with them, but I'm hoping to do the Christmas one. Equally brilliant band. So, but I think I'm a versatile singer, and I hate that people say, "Oh, you're a jazz singer." I'm not a jazz singer. I'm a singer. I mean, I think the most important job for a singer is to tell a story. The narrative, the lyric is always so important to me. But I sing all kinds of genres, and that's and I'd like to be pigeonholed. And I think at the age I'm at now, it's like, I'll do a big band.
So what's
gig.
the vision? What is because you've just done that show in Vicar Street with Leslie Dowdall, and that was
We'd hope to do more. It was Natural Women, and it's the music of Carole King and Linda Ronstadt, and hope to do more with it, because I feel, we were trying it out in Vicar Street. It would have been lovely to have had maybe a few warm-up gigs. That was the warm-up gig, but we thought afterwards, God, this works. We could take this to the theatres around the country, and like that, I think women, everybody frigging sat in their bedroom crying to tapestry.
But your story is phenomenal. I'd love to, because you've so
we could go on, couldn't we?
You have so many funny. You just told me one. Can you tell that Barry's so funny? Of course, he's a comedian, but can you tell that one funny story about
my colon?
The operation. That one hilarious. I didn't want to go on about. You've had a lot of.
I do have a medical history, and it is a funny thing. I mean, everyone says it. As you get older, you meet people and you talk about your, the bits that are falling off.
And it gets more and more and more. Like when I talk to my mother now, it is entirely medical.
It's all medical.
It's all medical.
For both of you.
Yeah.
I have a history of, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was pregnant at 40. And I think those kind of autoimmune diseases can come on with pregnancies. So I have a kind of history of inflammatory disease. I do believe, I don't understand why you have one doctor who deals with this and that's if they're all like not connected. It's one body. So I think my thing is in inflammation. So I had serious colon problems, and I had a portion of my colon removed in 2005, and then another section in 2010. And I was told I had 6 months later I would have had full-blown no going back from colon cancer. But when I had the second one done, the surgeon said to me before he put me under, we might have to have a bag, for a little while and whatever. So that was all that was in my head. So I'm, just coming to, and the first person I see, his face is right there, is Baz. And I'm just going, oh, bag. And he's going, but you don't smoke anymore. And in my head, I'm going, you fucking spanner. Not a fag. A bag. I wanted a fag. Imagine me just woken up from an anaesthetic, you don't smoke anymore. And in my head, and I didn't have a bag, thank God. But and
that reminds me of can you tell that other story, the Barry story after Luke was born? It was he was still smoking back then, 1996, and I had an emergency section. Luke was premature, and poor fella weighed 4 pounds 15 ounces when he was born. It was like freaking heavy stuff. And as Baz said, the baby is whisked away, I'm whisked away, and he's left there in his gown, kind of on his own. And what do I do now? So he decided to go out onto the steps of Holles Street and have a fag. So he's outside sucking on a fag, and there's another fella at the other end of the steps sucking on a fag, and they both look at each other. How are you? And Baz just went, that's mad, isn't it? And your man goes, yeah, bleed mad. Last year you could smoke in there. That is a great moment I could talk to you all day. I want to see the Flo McSweeney story. I mean, on stage, because it's all linked to song.
I suppose
and there's so much. Flo, thank you so much for this chat. Thank you for this chat. I've enjoyed it so much.
So have I.
Because the thing I really enjoyed, as well as the fantastic singing the other night, was you're so funny. Oh,
well, my family I don't think they think I'm funny. They think I'm funny mad. Mia, my daughter, says I get zoomies. Apparently I get about 7 o'clock every evening, I get a little bit zoomy, that kind of just go a little bit hyper and a bit mad. So
they think on stage.
They think I'm a little bit mad.
Zoomies, that's your show.
Zoomies. It's great, actually, isn't it?
Thank you, Flo.
Pleasure, Anne. It was a pleasure. Loved it. It was brilliant.